Few names cut through time like blades. One of them is Miyamoto Musashi, not because of his appearance, which was never clearly recorded, not because of his style, which no formal school ever managed to contain, but because he was a cut, a rupture in history, a samurai who faced over 60 real duels and won them all. A man who rejected armor, who fought with sticks against sharpened swords, and who claimed the real enemy was never out there. It was always within. This story is not about a fighter. It's about a spirit that learned to sever everything that made him weak: fear, lies, desire, noise, until in the end, he even cut through himself. What remains after that? Silence. But not just any silence. A silence that speaks, that teaches, that guides. A silence louder than any scream. This video is an attempt to translate that silence into words, and you're about to step into it. To understand who Musashi was, you must erase from your mind the romantic image of the polished samurai, full of honor, serving a lord in exchange for food and shelter. Musashi was the opposite of that. A Ronin, a masterless samurai who lived without belonging to anything or anyone. He wandered through feudal Japan like an armed ghost, dirty, ragged, but with the eyes of someone who had already walked through hell and come back carrying one certainty: life is war. A war against all that distracts, all that weakens, all that seduces, and the only way to win is to cut. Cut what others don't have the courage to release. Cut the ties everyone insists on calling life. In this brutal and philosophical dive, we'll use Musashi's 5 swords as a guide for inner warfare. Each sword will be a teaching, a strike, a principle, a practical lesson. We're not here to tell a biography. We're here to walk the path he carved, with blood, with pain, with steel, for those who dare to walk alone. You will understand why Musashi killed his first man at the age of 13 and then began killing fear. Why he gave up everything: wealth, love, fame, schools, prestige, and entered a cave to write rules for living without needing anything. And you'll understand why, at the end of his life, he wrote down 21 principles, dry, hard, cold, like a stone that teaches more than an entire book. The title of this video is no accident. Musashi's swords are literal, but they are also symbolic. He created a fighting style with 2 blades, one long, one short, that confused his enemies. But his real secret wasn't in the steel. It was in the invisible cut, in what he left behind. One sword to cut fear, another to sever lies, another for desire, another for noise, and the last to cut through himself. That's how he became invincible, not because no one could beat him, but because he no longer needed to win. A man who has nothing left to prove cannot be defeated. You don't have to be a samurai, but you do have to cut. Cut what's dragging you down. Cut what steals your time, your strength, your clarity. Musashi is a code, a raw example of discipline. No polish, no poetry. The kind of courage that doesn't shout. The kind of strength that doesn't pose. The peace that comes at the end of war. What you're about to see is not just a script. It's a sharp mirror. A guide to walk through the modern world with steady feet and clear eyes. Get ready, because once the first sword is drawn, nothing you know as life will remain whole. The first sword. Cut through fear. He was only 13 when he faced a grown man, armed with a real sword, stronger, taller, trained, more experienced, and killed him. Not by accident, not in a fit of rage, but by choice. That was Miyamoto Musashi's first cut, the cut of fear. While other boys were still playing with wooden dolls and trembling at the sound of their father's voice, Musashi was staring death in the face, with muddy hands, a trembling body, and steady eyes. Fear was there, of course, it always is, but he didn't let fear choose for him, because a true warrior is not someone who doesn't feel fear. It's the one who feels it, and goes anyway. Musashi realized early that fear was not an external enemy, it was an internal poison. a fog that clouds the mind, loosens the grip, and slows the step. Fear makes strong men kneel, makes brilliant women go silent, makes promising youths freeze. Fear is a silent assassin, and Musashi decided it would be the first to fall. The sword that cuts fear is the sword of action, of presence, of decision. It's not about rushing in without thought. It's about not letting thought rot into paralysis. Fear always whispers, "Wait, run, maybe tomorrow." Musashi heard it and answered with a strike. It's no coincidence that his fighting style was brutally direct. No flourishes, no elegance, no performance. Musashi fought like someone untangling a knot, quickly, ruthlessly, with the least possible hesitation, because he knew hesitation kills. On the battlefield, 1 second of hesitation can mean death. In the modern world, it can mean a wasted life. Musashi's first sword teaches this: cut fear before it cuts you. And how do you do that? With confrontation, with risk, with truth. Fear doesn't vanish through prayers, advice, or motivational speeches. It dissolves when you step, even with shaky legs, into the place that terrifies you. In historical records, a pattern emerges. Musashi always faced larger opponents, masters of prestigious schools, famous swordsmen, men who challenged him expecting a show. And what they saw was a filthy, tired man, sometimes late, wielding a wooden stick and winning, because Musashi understood that fear of reputation, of status, of name is just as deadly as fear of the blade. Defeating fear means not bowing to someone else's prestige, not shrinking before a title. Cutting through fear means cutting through comparison. You don't need to be better than the other, only not betray yourself in front of him. More than that, fear of failure was a luxury Musashi couldn't afford. He had no home, no master, no excuse, only himself. And that's a powerful lesson. Most people live to avoid failure. Musashi lived to avoid shrinking, because failing in itself is not the problem. But fleeing the battle is. The sword of fear doesn't just cut the enemy, it cuts doubt, the what-ifs, the "am I ready?" the "I'm not sure." Musashi never waited to be ready. He went, and because he went, he became ready. In today's world, fear has no face. It hides in screens, in notifications, in messages we don't answer, in decisions we postpone, in conversations we avoid. Fear is the habit of escape, cowardice dressed as caution, inertia disguised as waiting for the right moment. Musashi's sword calls for the opposite. Act, enter, face it, even while trembling, even imperfect, because every time you face fear, it shrinks, and every time you run, it grows, until one day it becomes bigger than you. Musashi was called savage, mad, barbaric, but that's because the civilized forget what fear looks like. They forget that courage isn't polished, it isn't elegant, it's raw, it's sweaty, it's dirty, and it's necessary. The cut of fear is the first because without it, none of the others are possible. You can't cut through lies, desire, noise, or even yourself if you're still chained by fear. Courage is the key that unlocks the path, and courage, for Musashi, wasn't a speech, it was a strike. Now that you've seen the first sword, prepare yourself, because the next one cuts even deeper. The lie, the illusion of the world, the ego, the theater. The next blade doesn't cut a physical enemy, it severs something more dangerous. The lie you've come to believe. The second sword, cut through lies. There is no enemy more seductive than the lie. Not the lie we tell others, but the one we tell ourselves. Musashi understood this early on. After winning his first duels, many expected him to open a school, build a dojo, accept disciples, and become a traditional master, like so many others who used the sword not to seek truth, but to preserve status. But Musashi refused it all. He refused because he saw that just as a blade can cut others, it can also dull the soul. The most dangerous lie doesn't live in words, it lives in appearances, in theater, in pride dressed up as wisdom. And that's what this second sword is here to cut. Musashi saw firsthand what ego does to trained men. He saw masters surrounded by flattering students, teaching dead techniques, soulless movements, lifeless repetition. He saw schools turned into stages where no one fought anymore. They only performed. And he decided he would not be an actor. That's why, throughout his journey, he challenged the most famous masters of his time, not out of vanity, but to expose the falseness of form. He fought dirty. He fought late. He fought with a wooden stick. He fought without asking permission. Because the goal was not to please, it was to win. It was to prove that form without truth is just a pose, and posing is a standing lie. To cut the lie is to cut the polish, to reject cheap applause, to silence the need to be seen. Musashi understood that many men lose the edge of their blade the moment they start fighting to be admired instead of to prevail. That's why he walked around dirty, unkempt, slept in caves, ate little, avoided baths, and mocked anything that could turn him into a symbol. He wanted to be real. He wanted his sword to speak for itself. He wanted to kill the lie, even the lie of the hero. This second sword doesn't just cut external theater, it cuts the internal performances, the excuses we tell ourselves. I can't because I don't have time. I'm not trying because I'm not ready. I won't change because this is just who I am. Musashi accepted no excuses from others or from himself. He knew that the ego spins stories to keep us comfortable, but the sword has no tolerance for comfort. It demands confrontation. Lies are comfortable. Truth hurts, but truth transforms. Musashi chose pain. He chose solitude. He chose the path where no one holds your hand, because that's the only path where you truly grow. Cutting the lie also means cutting the illusion of control. Musashi didn't rely on fixed strategies. He believed in adaptability. In every duel, he studied the opponent, the space, the moment. There was no script, only presence, perception, truth in the motion. He said, "If you know the broad way, you'll see the narrow everywhere," meaning those who master the essence don't rely on technique, they rely on clarity, on detachment from form, on inner freedom. Lies always demand a mask. Truth frees you from the need to appear. In today's world, lies hide behind performance, perfect profiles, cliché quotes, motivational posts, egos inflated by likes. But deep down, how many of these modern warriors sleep peacefully? How many have silence inside when they're alone? Musashi teaches that to be strong is to be true. Even if no one sees it, even if no one understands, even if the world finds you strange, because it's better to walk alone in truth than to be applauded for living a lie. The second sword demands moral courage. It doesn't defend you from enemies. It forces you to face the mirror. It strips away the layers you built to survive and asks, who would you be if no one was watching? That's the question that separates the strong from the fragile. Musashi didn't want admiration, he wanted freedom, and freedom only exists where the lie has been decapitated. Now that illusion has fallen, comes the hardest part. The third sword cuts what most never have the courage to release. Desire, the need to have, to own, to conquer. Musashi defeated that too, and that's why he's remembered to this day, not for everything he had, but for everything he let go. The third sword, cut through desire. No one conquers the world without first conquering themselves, and no one conquers themselves while still a servant of desire. That's what Miyamoto Musashi understood when, after defeating dozens of swordsmen, he chose a path that very few, almost none, dare to follow, the path of abandonment. Musashi could have chosen fame, power, women, comfort, the glory of a personal dojo filled with disciples and offerings, but he cut through all of it with his third sword, the blade that severs attachment. Because where there is desire, there is weakness, and where there is weakness, there is an opening for defeat. Musashi lived as a wanderer. He slept outdoors, rejected comfortable homes, avoided fixed friendships, never married, had no children. And when received by nobles, he declined privileges. His body was simple, his clothes worn, his eyes unshakable. He didn't want to have, he wanted to be, because the desire to possess is the greatest thief of freedom, and a warrior bound to what he owns is a man already defeated. Musashi chose to lose everything, so he could never again be conquered. The third sword doesn't cut flesh, it cuts invisible chains. Chains to vanity, to pleasure, to the addiction of recognition, to the impulse to show the world what you have, what you do, what you're worth. Desire is not just a feeling, it's a chain. Musashi broke it with every step he took into solitude, and with that he became even more dangerous. Because no one can control a man who wants nothing. To cut desire is to sever the root of nearly all human suffering. Anxiety is born from expectation, envy from comparison, jealousy from attachment, anger from frustration. All of it feeds on desire. Musashi understood that true mastery isn't over others, it's over oneself. And the only way to that mastery is radical detachment, not out of contempt but out of choice, choosing what's essential, choosing the hard path, choosing clarity over comfort. His combat style reflected that philosophy. He didn't embellish his movements, he used what worked. What was necessary, what was efficient, what was raw. He fought with wooden sticks when he could have used swords. He arrived late to duels to throw off his opponents, slept in abandoned temples, faced multiple foes at once, not arrogantly, but with precision. Because a man who has already renounced life does not fear death. And desire is, in the end, an attachment to continuity. Musashi didn't cling even to his own existence. In his final days, he wrote one of the sharpest rules in the Dokodo. Do not desire possessions unnecessary for your journey, but what is absolutely necessary. For Musashi, it was only that which strengthens the spirit, which purifies the mind, which sustains discipline. Everything else was trash, and a warrior who carries trash cannot win. He becomes slow, vulnerable, fragile. In today's world, we're taught to desire from an early age, to crave the new, the beautiful, the expensive, the admired. Marketing exists to inflate desire. Social media exists to compare it. And for many, life becomes a hollow loop trying to be filled with hollow victories. Musashi offered the opposite. He offered emptiness as an answer. The act of not needing as strength, the absence of desire as ultimate freedom, and for the weak that sounds like madness. But for those who have seen the path, it's the only cut that matters. This isn't about becoming a monk, it's about realizing that what you desire controls you, and what you release sets you free. Musashi wasn't a saint, he was a warrior who saw that desire made him vulnerable, and so he cut. He cut the impulse to prove. He cut the need for applause. He even cut the taste for blood. And when all that fell away, what remained was the essential, the will to exist with purpose. Now that desire has been conquered, only what's inside remains. And what's inside, when left unchecked, becomes an unbearable noise. Musashi faced that noise too. And from that battle, he forged his next blade, a sword without sound. The sword of silence. The fourth sword, cut through noise. If you sit in complete silence and feel discomfort, it's because there is noise inside. Musashi understood this when he stopped fighting. Not literally, but symbolically. After defeating dozens of opponents, perfecting his technique, and becoming the most feared warrior of feudal Japan, he didn't seek the stage. He sought the void, and in that void, he found the hardest sound to endure, the one inside his own mind. Musashi's fourth sword doesn't cut people's desires or lies. It cuts internal noise. It slices the chatter of the ego. It removes everything taking up space inside you that doesn't need to be there. Noise is not just sound, it's distraction. It's excess. It's that constant stream of thoughts saying, you need this, you need that, look at him, look at her, don't waste time, don't stay still. Noise is the voice of restlessness, of lack of focus, of useless urgency. And Musashi knew that a distracted warrior is a dead one. He said, know the way in its entirety, and to know it, you must silence, not just the world, but the self. The sword of silence begins to be forged when the noise becomes unbearable. And that's what led Musashi into a cave. There was no luxury there, no light, no comfort, just stone, cold, echo, and Musashi, alone with himself. For months, maybe years, he wrote, meditated, cut thoughts like he cut enemies, one by one, eliminating every illusion, every impulse, every distraction, because noise is the enemy of presence. And only in total presence can anything be conquered. Musashi fought with silence. He never shouted before striking, never made unnecessary moves, never showcased his strength, because noisy power is a sign of lost control. A true warrior is like water. It moves without sound, but when it hits, it destroys. Musashi's silence was sharp, intense, disarming. It unsettled his enemies before the first blow. Many felt fear before the fight even began, because they realized they were facing someone who had nothing left to prove. And a man with nothing to prove is dangerous. In today's world, noise is constant. It's digital, it's social, it's psychological. It's in the notifications, the feeds, the alerts, the addiction to always being busy, always running, always reacting. People are terrified of being alone with their thoughts, because they know that if they silence the world, they'll have to hear the emptiness within, and few can endure that. Musashi endured it. More than that, he sought it. He dove into silence the way others dive into crowds, and there, where no one could reach him, he found clarity, strength, truth. Cutting noise also means rejecting emotional noise. The unnecessary anger, the accumulated resentment, the anticipatory anxiety. Musashi knew that every emotion that does not serve clarity serves destruction. He wasn't cold, he was centered, grounded, light on the inside, because he had already emptied everything the world tried to dump inside him. And that isn't done through outer effort, but with an internal strike, a dry cut, a point of no return. Musashi's philosophy of silence wasn't meditative, it was strategic. He knew that only the one who quiets can hear, only the one who stops can see, only the one who is still can strike accurately. For him, silence was a weapon, a preparation, a portal into pure intuition. Musashi didn't fight only with muscles, he fought with senses. And to feel them, he had to be quiet. Today, more than ever, we need this sword. We need to cut the overload of voices, the avalanche of opinion. The compulsion to reply to everything, to comment on everything, to have a stance on everything. Musashi took his stance with his body, with his gaze, with his blade. He didn't explain. He was, and that said more than words ever could. And so after cutting through fear, lies, desire, and noise, Musashi arrived at the final strike. A strike that few are capable of delivering. A cut not against the world nor others, but against what remains of Inushu one day. Because in the end, the last thing that keeps you from being invincible is yourself. The fifth sword approaches, and it does not forgive. The fifth sword, cut yourself. There comes a moment in every warrior's life when there is no one left to face. All the enemies have fallen, all the battles have passed, all the duels have been won, and then silence returns, but not as a refuge. This time, it returns as the final challenge. Because the last obstacle between you and absolute freedom is not the world, it's not others, it's you. Your vanity, even if hidden, your identity, even if strong, your convictions, even if noble. Musashi understood this before he died, and that's why he forged the fifth sword, the blade that cuts the self. This cut doesn't bleed outward, it bleeds inward. It's the hardest, the most radical, the most transformative. It demands that you undo everything you've built, that you abandon even the ideas that made you strong, that you strip off the persona, that you shatter the mirror in which you finally liked what you saw. Because the true warrior doesn't cling even to success. He knows that attachment is weakness, even when the attachment is to his own image of victory. Musashi realized that after years of killing adversaries, he had become a prisoner of his own legend, and that was unacceptable. The fifth sword appears in the final days of his life when he enters the cave of Regando. There, far from everyone, with a body already failing but a spirit sharper than ever, he writes the Tu Dokodo, the way of solitude. 21 phrases, dry, without decoration, without pity, without self-help. A death code, but also a life one. The first rule, accept everything exactly as it is. The last, never stray from the way. And between them, a single thread connects all the words. Abandon everything you think you need, including yourself. To cut yourself is to let go of your own story. It's saying, I am not my achievements, nor my failures, nor my name, nor my traumas, nor my dreams. It's shedding identity like an old suit of armor, because the true warrior in the end fights naked, without defense, without title, without persona. Musashi became invincible the moment he realized there was nothing left to protect, no version of himself that needed to be preserved, no self that needed to be saved. In today's world, where everything revolves around building an identity, digital, professional, emotional, this sword may seem like suicide, but it's liberation, because as long as you need to maintain an image, you are imprisoned. As long as you need to justify who you are dependent. As long as you need to tell your story to be validated, you are not yet free. Musashi cut his own story, and by doing so, he died before dying. A supreme act of renunciation, of surrender, of transcendence. The sword that cuts the self is the only one not wielded by hand. It is sharpened by awareness, by clarity, by silence. It doesn't shine, doesn't impress, doesn't draw crowds. It moves within and cuts what remains when everything else has been stripped away. The attachment to existence itself. Musashi did not fear death because he had already died to everything that made him suffer. And that's why his presence still haunts time. This final sword ends the journey, not with glory but with emptiness. A full emptiness. A fertile emptiness, a void that no longer seeks to be filled because it understands that emptiness is the space where truth appears. It is the firm ground of the awakened spirit, the stillness of one who no longer needs to run. The fifth sword does not give you power, it gives you peace. And that peace is the apex of strength. Now that all swords have been drawn, only one thing remains, that which cannot be cut. The empty ring, the center point, the formless meaning. What remains when there is nothing, not even you? Prepare to enter it. There's a subtle, almost invisible detail in Miyamoto Musashi's most famous treatise, this Go-Rin no Sho, or the Book of Five Rings. He wrote 5 chapters, each named after an element: earth, water, fire, wind, and the last, void. Not heaven, not spirit, not glory. Void. A concept that escapes Western logic but defines the very essence of the warrior who learned to cut through everything. Because after fear, lies, desire, noise, and even the self, only one thing remains: nothing. And for Musashi, that nothing is where wisdom lives. The void is not absence, it's total presence. It's that which does not need to assert itself because it already is. The empty ring is the space that supports all the others. It is the invisible ground upon which all swords rest. Musashi understood that true mastery is not found in winning duels or writing treatises or teaching disciples. It is found in becoming transparent, in offering no resistance, in letting truth flow effortlessly. That is why the final stage of his path is the most subtle and the most profound. The warrior dissolves, and what remains is not his name nor his story. What remains is the silent space his life carved open. In the final chapter of the Book of Five Rings, Musashi gives no instructions. He doesn't outline tactics. He speaks of the void as someone who no longer fights. He writes, "In the void there is good, but no evil. Wisdom exists, logic exists, the way lies in the void." To many, this seems vague, abstract. But to those who have walked through the four previous rings, earth, water, fire, and wind, this is the ultimate revelation. When all that is solid dissolves, what remains is what is truly real. Pure intuition, action without intention, the being who acts without needing a reason. Musashi did not become wise by accumulating knowledge. He became wise by cutting away the excess. Everything unnecessary and he let go. Everything noisy he silenced. Everything attached he released. And at the end of his journey, all that remained was a clear space, a steady body, a light mind, a spirit that no longer needed definition. The empty ring is the invisible conclusion to a life lived without compromise, without distraction, without falsehood. In the modern world, we live the opposite. We live full of urgency, full of information, full of noise, full of selves that need constant feeding. And that's why we're weak, because strength doesn't come from excess. It comes from what is essential, from clarity, from silence, from the realization that you need almost nothing to be whole. Musashi's void is not nihilism. It is absolute presence, pure power, the terrain where precise intuition sprouts, where decisions carry no doubt, where the gesture cannot miss. The empty ring is also an invitation, a call for you to stop accumulating and begin letting go. Let go of haste, let go of comparison, let go of the image, let go of the need to prove something, let go of control, because when you release everything, something else begins to happen. You begin to see clearly, to see without filter, to see without the burden of self. And in that state, the world no longer threatens you because you no longer cling to it. Musashi died seated, in silence, holding his sword, not as a symbol of violence, but as a reminder of everything he had already cut. He died staring into the void, and within it there was peace. A final period that carried no weight, because everything that needed to be lived had been lived. Everything that needed to be let go had already fallen to the floor, and what remained was only this: the wisdom of nothing. Now that you've seen the five rings, the five swords, and passed through the void, only one thing remains: the ending. And it will not be a conclusion. It will be a farewell without sound, because Musashi didn't need words to show he had won. His silence said everything. Miyamoto Musashi died as he lived, alone. But it wasn't a bitter solitude, it was a chosen one. A powerful solitude, a sharpened solitude. He didn't pass away on a golden bed surrounded by servants. There were no public tributes, no rehearsed tears, no monuments built beside his pyre. He died seated, sword in hand, in the cave of Rei Gando after writing, with the steady hand of someone who had already cut through the entire world, 21 rules for living without needing anyone. That was Musashi's will. He left no inheritance. He left a code, a path, a brutal and liberating mirror for those who truly wished to master themselves. The silence of his death was the final lesson. He asked for no applause, gave no speeches, sought no redemption, because there was nothing left to say. Everything had already been written in each strike, each choice, each renunciation. And in the end, what remained was a presence that echoes through centuries without needing images, videos, or authorized biographies. Musashi is the code. He is the cut. He is the absence of ornament. And that absence teaches more than any course or manual, because in the end, truth doesn't need packaging. It needs to be lived. This video is not a tribute. It's a challenge, an invitation for you to stop hiding behind the search for easy answers and face the harshness of a real path. A path without amulets, without promises, without shortcuts. The path of the inner warrior. The path of someone who wakes without needing external motivation, who acts without waiting for permission, who walks without needing to be understood, because whoever needs approval has already surrendered the sword. You don't need to be a samurai, but you do need to cut. Cut the distractions, cut the victimhood, cut the noise, cut the borrowed identities, and when nothing is left, you'll see that what caused your suffering was exactly what you refused to release. Musashi let go of everything. That's why he became everything. Because there was no more struggle inside him, only the gesture, only the clarity, only the clean step of someone who knows he has already won, by no longer needing victory. If you made it this far, don't take this content as a distant story. Take it as a blade, an invisible blade you can now wield inside your own life. Because the modern world doesn't need more opinions, it needs silent warriors, people who master their own spirit, who live with purpose, who cut with courage, who act with truth. Musashi showed that this is possible, and he proved it with the only thing that cannot be forged, his own destiny. His sword lies on the ground. The code stands before you, and the silence now belongs to you.